first job was a hall director at a small private liberal arts institution in the Midwest.
My first position was as the campus community organizer for a coalition to prevent high-risk drinking. It was housed in a Dean of Students office, and it was funded by a research team off campus.
My first position was a pretty typical hall director gig.
And I've been working at Berkeley since 1986. So for 25 years I've been at Berkeley, and for the first 15 years or so I was pretty much a one-person office. But prior to that, I had a job at Middlesex Community College in Middletown, Connecticut, and I was the assistant director of student activities.
Internally promoted. I had been a counselor, and so I was really familiar with the mental health counseling side of things, and I was promoted into a position called Director of Counseling, although that title really didn't fully make sense and explain the extent of the role.
When I was working at the University of Houston, I was an activities advisor and advised a big, large 3-day festival called Frontier Fiesta.
There was a concert that I had never planned before that I kind of got roped into called LDOC here at Duke. So that was a larger concert than I'd ever planned before. It was a lot of funky moving pieces, but that's kind of a different hat that I wore.
The multiple hats that I had to wear there was I was also the assistant director of multicultural affairs as part of my collateral assignment. I oversaw 3 buildings, and then I also was an advisor to 2 different student organizations, and then sat on a few committees for campus-wide initiatives.
My job included being the coach for the women's softball team. I had to teach volleyball as a 1-credit class. I also was an assistant coach for the women's basketball team, and I was the coach for the women's volleyball team too. I took care of all the clubs, and at that time drinking age was 18 and had to get all the keg licenses too.
Things I was responsible for were academic advising, immigration advising, and also disability services. So some of those areas I had a lot more familiarity with, but some of them it was really a stretch to get up to speed.
I had to learn construction. They basically build an Old West town during the week of spring break, the week or so before the festival, and I found myself learning a lot about construction that week. And it's something that's actually helped me on in my job as I've gone along, but that was definitely something I didn't expect, and a different hat that I had to wear.
Programming responsibilities that I personally had were different because I had usually supervised people that were doing programming and had the opportunity to do programming myself. And that was a real challenge. I had to learn to put myself out there a little bit more, and I had to get over sort of a fear of failure because anyone who's programmed knows that you can't always make people show up to those things. So that was a real challenge.
I received a lot of training through the research team as well as through the campus. So that was how I got support with the different hats I had to wear, was that I felt like I always had someone to talk to, and I learned not to be afraid to ask for help.
Those that I didn't have a lot of experience in, I knew I needed to seek out support, or I would ask for guidance from the person that I reported directly to. I did not actively seek out those hats. They just constantly kept being placed upon you because it was a small private school, so there was more work that could be done with the amount of staff that was actually there.
Immigration regulations. This was also happening at the time that SEVIS was coming into play, so I had to get up to speed really quickly. And that was a challenge. I think what I relied on was the internal expertise around me of the staff who is now working with me and for me. And I also pulled off these really huge 5-inch books off the bookcase and started reading about immigration regulations, which is not very intriguing reading, but I felt like I really needed to learn. And I also attended conferences that I had not otherwise attended. And I began to piece together what I understood, what I felt needed to happen on our campus. Also really looked to other institutions and asked the folks on my team to glean information about some of the benchmarking that was happening elsewhere. So that's what I did to try to get up to speed.
academic programming was another one. I knew that I wanted to try another functional area after my res life career and hopefully something closer to academics, and that one I think paid dividends because that programming experience was very helpful in getting an academic counseling job. And then individual conversations within their programming structure was one that I really sought out because I felt like it would play on my strengths as a student affairs practitioner, and it was really challenging actually. I found that getting into those developmental conversations was a little clumsy and awkward at first, and it took me a while to sort of develop my style. But I think ultimately it opened me up as a practitioner to be more directive and asking questions, and hopefully benefited the students that I served that year.
Things I always pursued were on the diversity multicultural area. I served on, sometimes I would not be placed on committees, but I would be attending a lot of meetings or events. So when somebody would get off a committee, I would try to get myself onto that committee. So if there was a hat I wanted to wear, I was persistent enough to wait.
One hat that I sought out that I didn't have to wear was to be Dean on Call, and in that rotation and learn those crisis response skills with students. And it turned out to be one of the best things I've ever done. It probably made me busier than I needed to be, but it was a skill set that I'm really glad I sought out. So I would say trust your instincts when you really want to try something. There's probably something there worth listening to.
Prioritize. You need to speak with your supervisor to find out what's the most important to them and what they think needs to be done first and foremost, because that priority is going to help you establish what you need to spend most of your time on when you're looking at balancing the multiple hats you're provided with.
So, you'll hear, well, you just need to make time for that or find time for that. And this is my total bias about time management, but I've never met anyone who can make or find time, if you think about that in sort of more literal terms. So if you don't get something perfect this time, the academic calendar is very circular, and you'll get another crack at it when the Earth goes around the sun again. So time is circular. The do, I would say, is do make your boundaries around a recognition that with commitment comes cost, and that when you agree to do something, you're probably also agreeing to not do something else.
Give yourself the time to invest and dig down into one of these new areas when you're switching roles a lot before you begin to either implement any changes or form really strong opinions. So give yourself that time and take the pressure off yourself for at least, I'd say, the first 6 months is really about observing, learning, and formulating some ideas and opinions.
I also learned that sometimes you have to say no when you're asked to wear a new hat that you just don't have time for. I learned from a supervisor and mentor early on that if you add something new to your plate, or if you want to, you have to remove something else first. You either have to eat it or push it off the plate.
Now have my little son Brendan, who's home from school sick today, say hello. Hi. Have fun. Bye.